Welcome to the Pfeffer on Power podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Pfeffer, a professor at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business and author of 16 books on a range of topics, including the topic of my oversubscribed MBA class and this podcast, Power. Each episode, I talk to someone about their path to power and provide you with practical guidance about how to accelerate your career. But today, we are doing something a little different. This will be the last episode of the podcast for a while, and we wanted to leave you with a special one. Today, we're having a joint conversation with fellow Stanford Graduate School of Business lecturer and fellow podcaster Matt Abrams of the Think Fast, Talk Smart podcast. We will take turns interviewing Alex Rodriguez, former star athlete turned broadcaster and businessman, as well as a fellow professor of a course here at Stanford GSB that he will tell us all about. Alex is the CEO and chairman of investment firm Arod Corporation and is known as one of the greatest athletes of all time, playing 22 seasons in Major League Baseball, becoming a 14-time All-Star and a World Series champion in the 2009 New York Yankees. Having since pivoted to business and investing, Alex is in his 7th year co-teaching the Stanford GSB course, Strategic Pivoting, with my colleague and friend, Allison Kluger. I want to thank Alex and Matt for taking the time to get together with me, and I'm excited for you to hear our very interesting discussion.
Well, welcome, Alex. Thank you for joining both Jeff and me for this tag team interview. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm very excited. A little intimidated by both of you.
We are not very intimidating. Shall we get started?
Sure.
Okay. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what brings you to Stanford, brings you to campus. I know among your many jobs, you co-teach a class at the GSB. Can you tell us a little bit about the class and what you hope the students learn from you?
Yeah, the class is called Strategic Pivoting. I co-teach it with Professor Allison Kluger. Believe it or not, this is our 7th year. And usually we have 25 to 30 students. And it's just been a marvelous experience. And like me, I'm sure like both of you, you've had some type of pivot. And we just try to make it strategic. And we use the framework of planting, scanning, and piloting, which I've done pretty much my whole life before coming to this class. So the fact that now I'm in class teaching our students and helping our students with Allison Kluger, it's been a lot of fun.
Do you mind just really quickly walking through those 3 steps, they mean and how they play out? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think when you think about planting, you start thinking about what are your competitive advantages? What can you offer this particular space? How would my competitive powers or my even circle of competence be influenced in this particular place? And then you start scanning for opportunities. And how scalable is it? What's the TAM? Is this a good place for me to find the right people to collaborate with? And then pilots, I always feel pilots should be done small at the beginning. That way, if you falter or if you struggle, you can always lean back and try again, edit, cut, and then move forward. But that framework has been, very popular with our students.
Excellent. Thank you for giving us insight into what happens in the class. And I want to give a shout out to Allison. Both Jeff and I are friends with Allison. And those of you listening, Allison did a great episode with us on reputation and reputation management. Jeff?
So one of the things I try to teach in my Path to Power class is to get ready for what's next. Because I always tell my students, if you're flying in an airplane, you need to know where the emergency exits are before you need them. Mm-hmm. You need to know where the oxygen masks are before you need them. One of the things that I really admire about you is that, in fact, you did get yourself ready. It's interesting. Some people will be fired unexpectedly, but if you're a professional athlete, you know that sooner or later, the athletic prowess will wane and you'll have to do something else. So talk to me about how you got ready for what came after your athletic career.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe I'll start at the end. I mean, I mentor and spend a lot of time with tens and tens of athletes and former athletes. And they say that athletes die twice, when you retire and real death.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that to be true. And I find a lot of athletes go through major depression, they go through divorces, and you can only play golf and fish so much, right? So I think luckily for me, ever since I was 10 years old, I always thought about my two Bs, which were baseball and business. And I've always had a passion for baseball and a passion for numbers. So I've been thinking about life after baseball before my rookie year.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And because of that, you were able to see opportunities probably way before you were ready, or others were thinking about it too.
I think I was fortunate that because I was thinking about it so early on and I had a great passion for it, that I came at it from a prism of looking at opportunities different than perhaps other athletes.
What did you do to get yourself ready?
So I've been a lifelong student, even though I didn't go the traditional college route because I was in the major leagues from Miami, drafted by Seattle in 1993 as the number 1 pick overall. And I was in the major leagues at 18. Only one of 3 that's ever played in the big leagues at 18. Tony La Russa was, who won the championships with the Oakland A's here. I'm not sure who the third is, but I was the second or the third. And I've always thought about opportunities to invest, opportunities to learn, to surround myself with much smarter people. I always saw it as an opportunity that was exciting. And I think a lot of athletes looked at opportunities as like fear, and they ran the other way. And I think the best way you can do is, educate yourself as much as possible, learn it, understand it, and start small. Because what I felt, Jeff, is like if I make a $20,000 investment, which was, fairly small, that like a boat, if it's going really slow, you're going to be okay.
Right.
So I didn't want to come out of the gates investing millions of dollars. A, I didn't have it. And B, I just thought it was imprudent.
Many of your roles have found you in really high pressure, high stakes situations in a boardroom, on a baseball field. How do you work to stay calm and collected and communicate clearly when you're under that high stress?
I've been lucky because, I played almost 25 years of Major League Baseball. I played 7 in Seattle, 3 in Texas, and then finally I landed in New York for about 12 or 13 years. And I've had over 10,000 at-bats. And I'm a big believer in experience and pattern recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned from watching a lot of athletes, they say when you come play for the Yankees, the pinstripes are heavy. And what they mean by that is the kitchen sometimes is too hot. And what I sensed was that a lot of people when the kitchen got hot, so did their temperature. And they weren't able to control their emotions. And they weren't able to stay calm. And therefore, they would make a lot of silly mistakes, what we call clutch time, the most important part of the game. And those who are great, like Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Andy Pettitte, and many others, they have this rare ability to keep a very slow heartbeat when the stakes are highest. And I found the same thing is true with the Bob Igers of the world, or the Warren Buffetts, or the Jamie Dimons. They have that same ability. They're just not wearing pinstripes, they're wearing suits.
Right. Do you consciously do deep breathing or something to help slow that heart rate so you can be very present? Is there something physical you do, or you're just at a place where you can think it and it happens?
Yeah, post the pandemic, I kind of came out of it and I lost my ways. I got a little bit out of shape, kind of was working around the clock. Everyone thought the pandemic was going to slow us down. I think it sped us up a little bit.
True.
That's right.
There was no boundaries. I was doing calls at probably like you guys, 11, 12. You're like, what am I doing?
Right.
I need to get some sleep. So coming out of it, I focused basically from 8 o'clock in the morning. I changed my routine. From 8 to noon, I was going to say that's my me time. That's the time where I train, I meditate, I do yoga, I may read a book, do some podcasting, and then I'm in the office every day from 12 to 6 when I'm home in Miami. And that's been a really wonderful formula. The reason why, it's allowed me to focus on the most important things at our company. And then it allowed me to delegate to the 5 senior members that report to me and really trust my team. Exactly what I wanted to do with the Yankees. We call it pass the baton to the next guy.
Right.
Well, I'm doing the same thing as a leader of our company today.
So one of the things that I've noticed about you, and I noticed about some other athletes in football as well, is that you have built an enormous and very effective presence on media, both TV, but also social media. How have you thought about doing that? What have you done strategically to make sure that everybody knows who Alex Rodriguez is?
Well, I think it's important to be consistent with whatever you're doing. I also think it's important to be genuine and authentic. If you look at whether it's, Joe Rogan or whoever platforms are winning today, they're ones that they're taking the broker out of the way, meaning the news, the media, they're going direct to the consumer. So I think that's really important, that you can control your own message. And then two, I also think it allows you, I recently posted a young lady who was out of a job and won a Grammy the other day, and it was a beautiful story. So you're able to highlight others that are doing beautiful things in the community, whether it's business, sport, or entertainment.
And what did you do to make sure that you got, you're on a bunch of baseball talk shows and all. How early did you begin, and what did you do to make sure that people would give you that kind of visibility?
Jeff, I never really thought about life after baseball in media. That was one thing that I never thought about. But the one thing that I did have was I basically felt like I had my PhD in baseball, because I've been watching 3-4 games per night ever since I was like 10 years old. So I've been playing or watching or studying of some sort. And then the question becomes okay, you have the knowledge, but can you actually articulate it in a platform and say it in a, concise, understandable, digestible, entertainment way where you're speaking to, I always think my target audience is a 4th or 5th grader that has never played baseball, and just make it very, very simple. And that's, so far so good.
I love hearing a few things that you've shared about you target an audience specifically. You think about that. You think about your message. Going back to your previous answer about how you calm down, I like that you have routine and there's a practice. And you also talked about delegating. And it seems to me that you have a really interesting perspective on teaming and building teams. What advice would you have to a young leader or somebody who's new to the leadership role about what to look for and how to build a team, how to communicate within that team that would help? Because I know you've done that in your entrepreneurial role, but also in your team sports role.
Yeah, we have a great partnership right here. Like the three of us would be great partners because you guys are way smarter than me. You have a lot more experience than me, but we all bring something a little bit different to the party, right? And we can all lean from each other. We can all learn from each other. I just think sometimes it's a mistake if you get, 2 scientists and they're the only 2 in the room, well, they're only going to think one way. That's why I do believe that diversity is so important in how we select teams or board of advisors or board of governors. And, that's why I think Professor Allison Kluger and I are such great partners because, again, we come from, in a weird way, similar backgrounds from media. We're both bridge builders. We both like to inspire, teach, and learn. And I've just learned so much from her, both as my co-professor, but also I've taken her private, consulting class where she's helped me with messaging, managing, focusing. It's just wonderful. When you can surround yourself with great people, there's no better gift.
But one of the things you have to do if you're going to be able to do that is you have to let go of some of your ego. Because one of the things that I've seen among people is they think that they're better than anybody else at everything. And in order to do what you just described, which I think is amazing, you have to be willing to let go and to say, there are other people who know things that I don't know. And I'm sure you've seen some of your colleagues in baseball and outside of baseball who aren't able to do that. So what has permitted you to have what I would call appropriate modesty?
Yeah, well, Jeffrey, it would be silly for me to have you and Matt come to Yankee Stadium and teach me how to, hit a breaking ball.
It would be very silly.
It would be a little silly, right?
Ridiculous.
As smart as you guys are and athletic as you guys are. And it would be silly for me to come to GSB and try to teach you guys something. So I lead with a lot of listening. And I mean very intentional listening. There's a lot of great talkers. There's a lot of great starters and not a lot of great listeners or closers. And if you're a real intentional listener, I think you become a better communicator. And the conversation becomes more fun when that person that's delivering an important message, that he has a captive audience. So I think, one, you say ego, I think is more insecurity, right? And I think one of the reasons why Shark Tank has worked so well is because America gets an MBA once a week. They do it in an entertainment platform, and they do it where it's digestible, but you're not embarrassing them. So that's a really important part. So I actually love throwing myself in a room where everyone else is smarter, and I just get to go out and have great conversations and continue to in my educational journey.
Continue to learn. And I think, I think intellectual curiosity is a key to success. And you seem to have a lot of intellectual curiosity. Is that fair?
Very much so. As a matter of fact, I have 2 prayers I say every morning. Before my feet hit the ground, I say a prayer, and usually about 30 seconds. And it revolves around 2 things. One is diminishing your ego and enhancing self-awareness. So you want the ego to come down and self-awareness to go up. Well, what I found is when you win the World Series in 2009, like we did with the Yankees and we beat the Phillies, those 2 kind of work backwards, right? Right. Self-awareness goes down, ego goes up. That's a formula for failure.
Right.
So as a reminder, just really important to check the self-awareness and the ego.
I love that you're talking about self-awareness and that you lead with listening. And I think that's really powerful. I can imagine you're in situations, either in the mentoring you do with athletes or the entrepreneurial businesses you run, that you have to give feedback, and you have to give sometimes constructive, critical feedback. Do you have a philosophy or approach that you see working for you when you give that kind of feedback?
I think first, Matt, you have to have trust. Because if you don't have trust, forget what the messenger is saying. It doesn't matter how good the message is. If I feel like you're going to do it in a demeaning manner or not coming from love or a place to really help me, then the message is lost, no matter how great the message is. So I call it what I call a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which really includes, hey, Matt, I love that purple shirt. I think you're really smart. Love the glasses. Maybe work on, XYZ.
I was waiting for the XYZ.
Yeah. And then finish with something really gnarly that you're doing. And what I find is I actually introduced this in my early days. I call it green, yellow, red. And we do this with all our team members at Arod Corp. And we do this either weekly or once per month, monthly. And basically what it is you gamify the feedback, which means greens are all the things you're doing well. Yellow are all the things you got to watch. They're not quite red, but they're not quite green. Be careful. And then red is things you should stop immediately. And what's fascinating is when members now, almost to every person, you know what they start with? Give me the red.
Oh, interesting.
Give me the red.
Because you've built that relationship.
Well, it's also, it's more of a game, and you're doing it from love. You gamify it a little bit. And when you can shift the paradigm on that, where people are actually looking forward to the constructive feedback, that's a winning formula.
Let me do a follow-up. Do you set an environment where they can give you that type of feedback as well?
Oh my gosh, all the time.
How does that look?
Kelly LaFerrier from my team, who's my chief business officer, she spent a long time at Disney and ESPN. She's a wonderful woman, went to Georgetown. I mean, she did a little audio where she teed off on me the other day. It was like 5 minutes of just like really tough love.
Yeah.
And I loved her for it. And I said, well, you forgot the green and maybe the yellow. And she goes, no, the yellow's that part and that part. I'm like, oh, okay. But absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the main things I bring from sports. I've had some great managers, Joe Torre, many, won 4 or 5 championships, Lou Piniella. These guys are great communicators, but they're also, they have an ability to inspire and motivate, and their words are very powerful.
And nobody actually needs to know what they're doing right. You actually need to know what you're doing wrong.
Right.
So it's a good kind of feedback.
Yeah, and by the way, Jeffrey, I disagree with that a little bit. I do think that, especially with highly talented people, they also need to know what they're doing right sometimes.
Sure. Okay.
Always say a player needs a pat, on the back sometimes. Say, hey, come on, keep it moving, because it can't always be red or yellow. Sometimes you got to, tell them that something really good is jumping off the page and to keep that up.
So I have a question. So you, of course, had a setback with the banned substances scandal. It's interesting. I tell my students all the time that in almost every career, bad things happen. And the issue is not, are bad things going to happen? Because of course they will. The question is, how do you recover? How do you build resilience? So talk about that, how you came through that, how you built resilience to survive setbacks, not only in that, but in your business career, et cetera. I think resilience is really the key to success.
Yeah, I mean, before I get into my low point, which was my darkest hour for sure, an incredible learning experience for me, a little bit on failing, because one of the great advantages of being a former baseball player is that I live in an industry that if you fail 70% of the time, you end up going to Cooperstown, which is the Hall of Fame. It's remarkable.
Yes.
Imagine if out of every 10 classes you guys teach, 3 of them are good. You guys would be fired, right? But for us, it's celebrated. So what I mean by that, I always tell people that I'm 5th all time in the history of the game. 5th in the history of strikeouts. That means there's only 4 people in the history of mankind that have ever failed more than me. So I always tell my daughters that, Daddy has a PhD in failing, but I have a master's in getting back up.
Yep.
And I think that's the key to remember, is how you get back up with the same energy and an enthusiasm. So if you put that framework with my suspension, my PEDs, which I served the longest suspension in Major League Baseball history for PED use, it took me a while to get here. But I think it was 3 things that I'm thankful for. Number 1 is you got to take full accountability. And this falls into the self-awareness, full accountability. And there's no excuses. There's no one to blame. There's only one person, and you're looking at them in the mirror, and that's me. That's number 1. I think number 2 is that led me to, over the last 10, 11 years, being in therapy. And therapy was really important because it allowed me to turn the lens inward. And you got to understand that ever since I was 15 years old, when they said Alex is the best 15-year-old in the country and is going to be the number 1 pick in 2 or 3 years, to the time I got suspended, almost 40, I never heard the word no. So
Yes.
you build very little self-awareness and the ego gets pretty inflated. So I think therapy has been an incredible byproduct, ironically, of my great mistake, and then messaging. And this is what we do in strategic pivoting. But the messaging without the first 2 means very little. It's hollow. So I do think you got to take accountability. You have to have, whatever work you have to do in yourself. I did it via therapy through a great therapist that saved my life. And lessons learned have been unbelievable, which has now put me in a position here where I'm able to, talk to the next generation of young men and women about my mistakes, and hopefully they can avoid my mistakes. And then communication about, what's next. But you have to lead with the mistakes and just address it right off the bat.
And the communication about what's next included what?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to be, one of the main voices for Major League Baseball. I work at Fox Sports. I worked at ESPN for a long time doing Sunday Night Baseball. We have this wonderful company with great people that's kind of in the middle market private equity that we focus on 3 silos. We focus on sports, real estate, mainly multifamily apartments, workforce housing, and then third, venture and private equity investing, in which we've invested in over 40 companies over the last, 17 or 18 years. So that's a little bit of what's next and what's now. And
thank you, by the way, for opening up and being so candid and authentic. I'd like to talk a little bit about authenticity. You come off in a very authentic way. I believe it's very genuine. How do you think about authenticity in terms of the value it brings? And it requires self-awareness, as you've mentioned. I'm just curious your perspective on authenticity.
It's ironic, Matt, that you're asking me about this, because this is something that I really struggled for the first, I would say 25, 30 years of my life before therapy, because I came across as very slippery. And not to make any excuses, but I grew up with a bunch of slippery people. And they spoke, in the Latin culture, we say, fake it till you make it.
Right.
And my great mom, who's one of my heroes, who's almost 90 and is kicking and can drink me under the table. I don't drink much, but she is almost 90. Yeah. I saw her working 2 jobs, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, working at General Motors in New York City, and then serving tables at night. And I saw this incredible work ethic. But that was that was the good. The bad is like you never got a lot of the truth from anybody. So once I got through my therapy, I started developing an ear for saying, boy, that person is really full of it. Well, I was never able to hear that before. And it was like it was like a watershed moment for me that I'm like, oh, this is an incredible thing. It's like not being able to see, and now I can see.
Right.
Well, not being able to hear when somebody's full of it, and now you hear it, which also includes self-awareness of how I sounded. So one of the things I do with a lot of my close friends is like, watch me here, Matt. I can be slippery here, so watch me. Make sure that I'm good here. And that type of back and forth coaching and mentoring has been a great tool for me.
I think that's wonderful that you actually, one, are aware, but you also ask others to give you that feedback so you can make those changes in the future. And the fact that you have a sensitivity to this might be a situation where I might have some inauthenticity. I think all of us can take a lesson from that to, one, raise our awareness, but two, enlist the help of others to help us be better.
Well, man, I got a great example for you. I mean, as you can imagine, teaching at the GSB when you don't even have a college degree could be quite frightening. It's like finishing your last year, Jeffrey, at Little League Baseball, and you're the coach of the Yankees. You're like, wait a minute, how does that work again? I'm supposed to teach Jeter and Arod how to hit?
Right.
I'm just a professor. I'm a legend, but one of my greatest learning opportunities for me, and it's been just incredible, is the way Allison coaches me as her as her Robin, for lack of a better term.
To Batman.
To Batman, right? And of course, she's
I want to see
Batwoman.
that picture, actually,
I'm
at some
Robin.
point.
And it would be good as we do that for Halloween. But, her emails are like legendary on like how thorough and how she watches and how much she pays attention. And because Allison Kluger has my trust, there's nothing in that email that I wouldn't think is 1% authentic and there to help me and to develop. And one of the things that I've been really excited about is she told me recently how much I've grown from year 1 and 2 to like the last 2 years, which has been great. Because when I'm struggling, she also tells me that, things that I need to work on my yellows and my reds.
Exciting.
That's good. So what advice, in coming back from setbacks, which is, I think, amazing, how did you find the inner resilience to do this? Part of this was therapy, but there must be some other things that you did that you could advise people when they've had setbacks, how to think about a future when they're oftentimes mired in a difficult present.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, everybody handles, setbacks their own separate way. I don't care who you are. I mean, I don't care how perfect you are. You can be named the best CEO, he or she, and they've had setbacks. I guarantee it. Or else they just haven't been in the world of business or in life. So, again, I think this is where baseball has really helped me, because baseball is the epitome of setbacks. So I think having the resilience, the confidence, the perseverance from inside to keep trying. I mean, I remember, Jeffrey, in my darkest hour, I would send 10 emails out and I would get like 1 or 2 responded, and it was heartbreaking. And part of it was because I was a pariah and people didn't want to be around me. And Allison worked really, really hard with the administration, vouching for me. And it's something that I'll never forget. I mean, here I am on my darkest hour trying to fight back. And Allison, out of all people, they're probably saying, there's 750 Major League Baseball players. This is the one you got? The guy that got suspended for all these years? And she's like, yeah, he's actually a nice guy. And this and that. It's like, I'm not sure if I'm buying it. But, I mean, here we are 7 years later, and I couldn't be more proud of the partnership. So my point is, like, being able to go back to that at-bat like you haven't failed before, with the optimism and the energy. And that's a real gift. Because so many people have baggage that they just can't get over. And it's really their biggest obstacle and their ceiling they create for themselves.
And you have to get beyond it. And also, at times of trouble, Warren Buffett has a saying, when the tide goes out, that's when you see who's naked. When people have setbacks, that's how you figure out who your real friends are.
That's right.
And that's how you figure out who are the people who are really going to be helpful to you in your...
And to remember, this is something I didn't know, years ago, where when you have a setback is an opportunity, because everybody's watching how you handle a setback, not how you handle the wins, but how does he behave or she behave when something bad happens? And if it's really bad, even better, because you get a better valuation on who you're looking at. But the two things I've taught my daughters from very, very early on, my daughter, Natasha, is a sophomore in college. I have two daughters. She's a sophomore at Michigan in the musical theater program. And Ella is a junior in high school, and she's excited to pick her college. But the two things I taught them early on, especially when the chips were down and you're in a dark hour themselves, is two things. Number one is always stay calm and keep your cool. And number two, never give up. And to this day, when things are going, they'll run, and two, and they'll write it out for me, which makes my heart, very happy.
And particularly in musical theater, that's a tough business.
Oh, very much like baseball.
That's a tough business. A lot of competition.
And a lot of no's. And I tell my daughters, I eat no's for breakfast. Bring them. The more no's, the better. That means you're trying.
And you don't get what you don't ask for.
That's right.
That's why you're here today. Because we had enough nerve to ask Allison, can you produce
that? And willing to do the work and willing to show up and, all those things.
Can we talk a little bit about emotion? I remember watching you play, and you played with emotion, and you brought that energy in. And how do you find that you have, what are the tools and techniques you use to show your passion and interest, but also to damp it down when appropriate in certain interactions? Because you can't bring that fire and that passion all the time. It might be inappropriate. It might not get you to the direction you want. Do you have anything you do to help manage the emotion in the moment?
It's a bit of an oxymoron, right? Because you want to be really excited and have passion,
right?
But at the same time, you want to be, cool as a cucumber, right? So the balance of the two, how do you thread that needle? And I would say that's just years of experience. But what I would say is this, is the more prepared I am, whether it's watching videotapes or doing my drills on the batting cage or fielding, just being ultra prepared, which has been one of my great superpowers. Like, there's a lot of people that may be more talented and smarter, but they're not going to outwork me. They're not going to be there. I was in spring training. Joe Torre would say, reports at 9 o'clock in the morning in spring training in Tampa, in George Steinbrenner Field, where we host spring training. And I would show up at, 5:30 in the morning. And when my teammates were coming in, I was already showered twice, had eaten breakfast, and took a little nap. And people were like, "What, are you tired?" I go, "Well, I've been here for 4 hours, And so the more prepared, the more fortunate I get, the more ball bounces your way. And ultimately, it can, relax you a little bit.
And I don't know what Matt's experience has been, but I think that's a message that the current generation really needs to hear, because my sense is that many people today want to skate by and not put in the work.
I don't know what the motivation is for it. I certainly know people are busy and distracted and there's a lot going on, but preparation in any interaction, communication, leadership, et cetera, can really help. And it gives you that opportunity then, because you can do it, to be more mindful and thoughtful of your emotions and how best to approach it. So preparation is really important.
I also think discipline, right? I
mean,
part of being a great communicator is, sticking to your circle of competence.
Yeah.
Speak with passion, but something where you actually have real knowledge. You have something to actually add. And we live in a world where everybody wants to comment about everything. It doesn't matter what the subject is. And that could be overwhelming.
It's actually worse than that. Everybody wants to have control over everything.
Right.
Even people, we're going to appoint cabinet secretaries who know nothing about the departments that they're running, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to drill down on that notion of discipline around messaging. When you have an important message to get across, what does that practice look like for you? Do you memorize something? Do you just know what the key point is? Do you find examples and stories to tell to reinforce it? How do you work that skill that you have of discipline and apply it to your communication?
Yeah, it's funny. I've read so much about Steve Jobs, as I'm sure both of you have. And his preparation, like his hours per minute,
right.
It was just fascinating. Whether it was 10 to 1 or 20 to 1, it was an absurd number of preparation. And it taught me that if Steve Jobs is doing it, who's smarter than most people, then I should definitely be preparing.
Right.
So I think about a few things. I think my style of communication is a blend between sports and business.
Yes.
and a little bit of entertainment and levity. I always think about like, what is the number one or two things that I'm trying to deliver? And then I'm trying to go, every good story is has a good headline, has a beginning, middle, and end, and then maybe go back and repeat my headline. And if I can say more with less words, the better.
I love that you're focused on concision and structure.
Yeah.
My students are going to love that Arod is practicing the things that I teach. Thank you.
And also, of course, the preparation. There's really no substitute
None.
for preparation, and there's no substitute for the other thing you were talking about, which is to know what you're doing. In other words, you begin with the message, and you know what the message is. And many people, I think, come in and they don't necessarily know what they're trying to communicate and how they're trying to communicate it, and what the point is and why they're trying to make that point.
Well, I love what you're saying there, and I think what preparation does for me is it allows me to be present in the moment, listening. It also buys me the opportunity to be spontaneous. Because I'm prepared and I hear something, well, I'm going to engage because I'm prepared. I can be fluid. If I'm not, I may be thinking in my head, oh boy, where's Jeffrey and Matt going to go next? And you feel that tension as a communicator. And you definitely don't want to give that energy off when you're a leader trying to lead men and women.
You echo something that I often teach, and I think it's great that an athlete is doing, because I often tell people, like athletes, the preparation allows you to be spontaneous. You do all these drills, but then when you get out on the field, things go lots of different ways, and it's a result of that preparation that you can respond in an agile way, and it's wonderful to hear you echo that.
I love that, Matt, and I'll add one thing to that, because I'm really passionate about this, and we have our Monday huddles, which is a little bit of a staple, which is every Monday at noon, East Coast time. We have about 25 members of our core team, and they're spread all over Zoom, and we have a conference room, and everybody gets about 2 minutes to talk about their 3 goals for the week. And the reason why I like that is, when you verbalize that in front of your whole teammates and your entire team, there's an accountability that comes to that. But I love the ability of being prepared. And I'm going to go to Jeffrey now, but I'm going to come back to that because I lost my train of thought a little bit.
No worries.
Oh, well, but you talk about goal setting. I mean, what you accomplish in that huddle is goal setting. And there's a lot of research that suggests that goal setting, if you set goals, you're much more likely to reach them. And even though that sounds completely common sense, it's amazing to me how many people don't do that. One of the first things I do in my class, and I suspect Matt does in his class as well, but the first thing I do in my class, which is on power, is to ask students, pretend it's the last day of the class. What have you achieved? So let's start by figuring out what would success look like. Because if you don't know what success looks like, you're not likely to get there.
I like that.
I think that's one of the most powerful questions you can ask is, what does success look like in my communication, in my leadership, in my relationships? Because then you have focus.
It is amazing how many folks fear communication.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Then the opposite is true. Like, there's some folks out there that I know that feel comfortable speaking in front of 20,000, but feel very uncomfortable in front of 20 people. Yeah. And vice versa.
Right. Yeah. 85% of people report feeling nervous in high stakes situations. And I think the other 15% are probably lying.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we could create something. You mentioned that you mentor athletes. I'm curious, what's the number one thing you tend to focus with them on to help them post playing?
I think the number one thing is to have a plan. I think second is take your time. You may be old for an athlete, maybe you're in your early 30s or mid 30s, but you're a child in business. And I always refer to 2 of my heroes, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. Right. I mean, Charlie almost went to 100, and Warren is well on his way. And to think about a guy like Warren Buffett, that he's made 99.5% of his net worth after his 50th birthday, is never too late. Your age is never a limit, but your mindset's the limit. So I always encourage athletes to take your time, surround yourself with great people. If you're playing basketball, if you had a wand, who would be your top 3? You'll probably say Steph Curry, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Well, think about business the same exact way. Go find the best people in the world. And because you're an athlete, that's one of your competitive advantages. Go out there and ask questions. And there's never a dumb question. take a bunch of notes, review, follow up, and get your reps in.
So it's about mindset, really,
Yes.
in that focus.
So you, of course, have amazing athletic gifts, and you've had an amazing athletic career, and therefore that has positioned you to do some amazing things. What advice would you give to people who aren't professional athletes in terms of your own life experience? How could you, in other words, my sense of you is that you are an extraordinarily thoughtful individual who can probably give good advice to people who are not necessarily superstar athletes in terms of what lessons could they take from what you've done?
Well, I think I'm only, Jeff, a good advisor because I've made so many mistakes. And I'm very, very open to discussing those mistakes and like why I made them and the thoughts behind them, and maybe how can you as a listener avoid my mistakes. And this works really well with young men and women, whether they're in high school or college or, aspiring, superstars in the world of business. For me, that's one of the most important things.
I mean, you were able to leverage, and I've seen other people do this as well, leverage their athletic careers to give them a good head start in business. But if you don't have that superstar thing, other qualities other advice that you could give?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I think the two greatest assets that you can have is, gratitude and humility, and effort and coachability. So if you're a young person and perhaps or my age or even older, and you're not a baseball player or a football player, every person has a competitive advantage. They have a superpower. Understand what your strengths are and your weaknesses are. And in the world of strengths and circle of competence, how can you lead with that and with humility and gratitude, and try to surround yourself with the best people in the world? That may be reading books, that may be podcasting, that may be showing up at conferences, that may be like a lot of networking. And look, if you're not someone that comes with some tailwinds because of popularity or followers, or however you measure, stardom and reach, is you may have to work a little harder. You may have to have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner set up almost every day to network and so you may have to do more numbers to get, the same numbers as someone doesn't have to work as hard. And that's okay. That's just part of the journey.
I like that answer. That's a fabulous answer. Thank you again to Alex and Matt, and thank you for listening to our conversation. The podcast is going on hiatus as of this episode. I want to thank my listeners and supporters for staying with Pfeffer on Power for the past 2 years. It has been a joy for me to be able to interview such fabulously interesting guests and to provide you such useful and important content. Of course, the episodes already recorded will live on the internet and where they were originally published on Apple and Spotify, YouTube, and so forth. This has been the Pfeffer on Power podcast, where every episode we talk to an accomplished individual about their path to power and the practical lessons for you. If you enjoyed this episode, buy my recent book on power, 7 Rules of Power, connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or jeffreypfeffer.com. Pfeffer on Power is a production of Stanford University and University FM.